What's up, everybody? It's your boy Tyreek, and this is another episode of Faith Talk. Today, I just want to talk to you guys about the subject of finding God's calling for your life. And I believe that a lot of young people and a lot of people live this thought life or this life as they can't be used by God or they can't be great for God. But the great thing about finding God's calling, and when you do find God's calling for your life, is that God will use you for whatever He called you for. I think of the people that lived in the Bible, and that was great in the Bible. For example, Moses. Moses parted the Red Sea. We all know that Moses by himself didn't part the Red Sea, but God used Moses to part the Red Sea, and that's one of the greatest stories in the Bible. As how God can use a man to do this great work. And I believe that God can use you, God can use me, to do a great work for Him. And I believe that God has a great work that wants to be done through us. But us as Christians, we have to be willing. I think of Paul, who we sometimes consider one of the best Christians that lived in the Bible. He also reaching these a lot of people right into a lot of churches, being a great missionary, and a great preacher, and a great, he was basically everything, and he was a great man for God, and he lived for God, and he changed this. He was saved, he was a sinner, just like us, he considered himself as the chief of sinners, and I believe that a lot, like I said, like a lot of Christians, live this mindset that they can't be used by God. They think they too dirty, for God they too dirty that God can use them, and me myself, is guilty of it, guilty of, thinking that way, that God can't use me. But in reality, when we do find God's calling for our life, He uses us to live out that calling, like I said, great men in the Bible, and even great men today, the pastors that's on fire for God, nowadays, and the churches that's on fire for God nowadays, they are living out that calling of God because their foundation is Jesus Christ. We got to make Jesus Christ our foundation with every decision that we make, whether that's relationships or career goals or going to school or what type of college to go to. God will use you if you make Him your foundation of your life and for your calling, and whatever, He wants you to do. God calls some to be preachers, God calls some to be pastors, God calls some to be youth directors, youth pastor wives, missionaries, or whatever, full-time ministry, or He even wants you to be a nurse or have a secular job or this or that. But God has a calling for your life, and you have to find that calling. And one way to find that calling is through prayer. You gotta pray. You gotta pray without ceasing. You have to pray to God, ask God to give you wisdom, give you knowledge, give you advice, give you strength to find His calling. And the men that lived in the Bible back then and those that live in today, they didn't get where they were. They didn't get where they at by themselves. They prayed, they fast, they seeked God, basically. And that's one way you can find God's calling for your life. Another way you can find God's calling for your life is through staying out of sin, because I think of the nation of Israel. In Isaiah chapter, I believe it's 59, God talks about how the nation of Israel, sin kept them away from God. Their sin separated them from God, and that's the same way, with us. If we sin, if we live a life of habitual sin, and we just continue to sin, continue to do what we want, continue to fornicate, to continue to lust, to continue to listen to the wrong things, hang around the wrong people, God is not going to show us His calling, because we too stuck up in sin. And a lot of Christians, say, oh, why can't I find my calling for Christ? Well, are you living in sin? Are you living in sin? And that's one way, you can find your calling, is stay out of sin, And I know a lot of people say, I want to be a preacher, or I want to get married when I get older, but they're not living up to them, them principles right now. You got to live right now. You got to stay out of sin, to find, you know, God's calling for your life, and that's with anything. Find God's calling. Talk to your pastor. Talk to your parents. Talk to anybody. You know, talk to your friends. Hang around the right friends, those that will uplift you and not downgrade you or put you down. You know, for any type of call. Even if you keep switching your decisions, you know, God can still use you. He can still use you. And I just convict you today to just find God's calling for your life. Whatever it is, whatever calling he has for your life, and he do got a calling for your life. Find it. Find it. Pray. Stay out of sin. Continue to seek him. Continue to read his word and get wisdom. Peace.